Um,
Fine.
am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Communication implies meaningful interaction. Interaction between more than one individuals, institutions, individuals and institutions. Institution as simple as, say, two bodies, two organizations. And at the other end, you have interaction between two nations. Communications thus is a two-way process, give and take. And it involves exchange of commodity, exchange of ideas, thoughts, such intangible materials. And whenever there is an exchange, it also implies that, as I said earlier, give and take. One party gives, and in return, the other party also gives back something, either in kind or in cash. So these general principles also apply to science communication. However, till date, science communication has been more or less, at least in our country or in the context that we are talking about today, a one-way street from producer to consumer. From those who practice science, who develop new scientific ideas, discover new scientific history behind some natural phenomena to find out the scientific principles that govern this phenomenon. To those who are uninitiated, they may not be followers of the same discipline of science, or they might be totally unaware in the sense that they have not studied or pursued science as a vocation in their life. Thus, we have a large spectrum of those who are beneficiaries or end users of science and its product, technology. But this has, as I said, been a one-way process, only from scientists to those who are not scientists or those who are not students of science. However, this is changed, this ought to change, this is already changing. As the title of this webinar suggests, role of science communicators in enhancing public participation in science and technology. This means that we want now to involve the public at large, the man in the street, in the process of this communication, science communication. So that is first paradigm change that we are seeking about. I'm going to put before you a number of new paradigms that are likely to govern or that ought to govern the entire spectrum of science communication in the future, near future as well as distant future, in fact, more of a near future. And to a certain extent, the pandemic that we have unfortunately experienced over the last couple of years has underscored this particular paradigm of public participation. But we could not have met the threat of this pandemic, threat posed by this pandemic, that has affected our lifestyle, our economic situation, our entire life history way, that we could not have done that. We could not have overcome this threat, or we could not have met this in a very effective manner that we have done, unless the public also participated in a major and meaningful way. Take, for example, the process of vaccination. In our country, we have done remarkably well in this respect. Almost more than 95% of our eligible adult population has been vaccinated at least with one dose. And close to 80% have received 2 doses, and thus they have been fully vaccinated. Some doomsayers had predicted that we would be devastated by this pandemic. There would be something like 300 million, 30 crores or more than that would be affected by this virus, would be infected by this virus. And we'll have something like 30 million, 3 crore deaths. We have not been anywhere near those deaths. Those doomsayers have been proved wrong. As of today, the total persons infected at any time over the last couple of years has been something like 4 crores, 4.5 crores, of which 4 crores and 30 lakhs or more than that have already recovered. And the death figure is around 5 lakhs or so. Less than 1/10 of what was predicted. There's no reason that we should be complacent about this. Nonetheless, this is not an achievement which can be merely wished away or which can be ignored. And this has been possible because on one side, we have been able to educate the public at large, those who were likely to be infected by this virus, about the merits of healthy practices like wearing a mask or observing social distancing, testing, response to testing, and also to vaccination, the merits of vaccination. This was done by science communicators, doctors, scientists, others, to encourage, not only educate, but encourage the public in this great effort. And the public has equally responded by practicing in all this and also to educate those around them to observe this principle, these practices in a very diligent manner. So that's why I said the first paradigm of science communicators, or first science communication, and the role science communicators can play is to have a participatory mode of science communication, not just the educative mode. Involve the public in the very process of communication in a very major way. Establishing protocols, developing projects that will involve the public at large into the very process of science communication. I'm not going to deliberate much more on this for want of time, but I had elaborated on this concept in a talk that I had given a couple of months ago at Parshuram College in a symposium of a similar kind. There is another change that ought to be brought about. For so far, science communication has been equated with enhancing scientific literacy. Well, that helps, no doubt. Nonetheless, it is not an absolute prerequisite. Scientific literacy does not necessarily ensure that the message of science has been imbibed. What the role of science communicators would be, not necessarily to educate, that can go on simultaneously, but more so to ensure that rational way of thinking, which is the basic foundation of method of science, what we call method of science, questioning every statement, no matter whom it emanates from, even those what we call established principles need to be questioned continuously. And unless we get an absolute proof of those, or we do not get a proof otherwise, negating those principles, negating those statements, we do not accept this. So this rational way of thinking, and that does not mean that it extends only to scientific research or development of science, but it pertains, it is important to every demeanor, every endeavor that we undertake in our life, to almost all walks of life. I mean, simple things. So let's say cooking your meal, you get a recipe. Many times that recipe is followed blindly. Do we ask a question as to why this should be done? Why the ingredients have to be added in the sequence that is mentioned in the recipe? Can we not jump that? Or is there any chemical reaction that is involved, certain scientific principle that is involved? And if that is known, then not only would the cooking improve, but it would also probably help in developing more efficient, more recipes that would involve less energy consumption and help towards establishing sustainable practices of science. So what is necessary is to inculcate what is called a scientific temper. Unfortunately, the word scientific, although it is quite relevant, has led to this misconception that science communication is the same as involving scientific literacy. What we wish to have is established scientific temper. And if that is inculcated in a large section of population, it will help the way what our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, had said or had suggested and established, that science and technology are tools to bring about economic prosperity and social equity. And if that has to be achieved, then this method of science, the rational way of thinking, should be inculcated in a large section of population. That is the second paradigm that science communication has to undergo. The very objective of science communication is to define a clear-cut, more precise and relevant manner. And that involves that objective is not to enhance scientific literacy, not the sole objective anyway, but have a broader objective of inculcating scientific temper. Another misconception which has been established in the minds of people is that science is what takes place within the four walls of a laboratory. And it is something that is done only by those in the proverbial white coats, those who are engaged in scientific research, to make us understand the principles and laws that govern various natural phenomena, and thus allow us to understand that in a more better fashion. It's not necessary. Science, in fact, is everywhere all around us. Every activity that we do or undertake, every endeavor that we pursue, everything that we do to live in a way involves science. There's science behind every activity. And if we understand that, then we will be in a much better shape to carry out those activities in a very meaningful way, in a very sustainable way. And I'm again and again using this word sustainable because we have reached a situation with the natural resources that we have at our disposal throughout the world are getting fast exhausted. And not only that, but the way we have been using those natural resources have given to waste products or the byproducts which are endangering our lives. The climate change that we have been experiencing, the global warming that we have been experiencing is as a result of wanton abuse, wanton use of the natural resources that we have in our possession. So if we want to get away from that, make life not only more comfortable, but more sustainable, whatever we do, the legacy that we're going to pass on to future generations. And if we wish that they live as well or even better than what we have been living and continue to do that, then we'll have to understand the very basic principles and have developed practices that will use the resources in a more frugal manner or more profitable manner. The world at large, many countries, including ours, have vowed to bring about a net zero energy by the year 2050 or 2070 at the latest. This means that we have to find out ways of both minimizing wastage of the resources that we have and developing new resources that are necessary to maintain the activities that we have. Perhaps at the same pace if we can do it, if not at a reduced pace, but in a more efficient manner. And that can be brought about only if the man in the street also starts thinking in a very rational manner. And that should be the objective of science communicators and the third paradigm change. Now, I talked about participatory mode of science communication. This means involving the entire society. And if you want to do that, then first what we have to do is to inculcate this scientific temper or rational way of thinking into opinion makers. So they are the ones who become sort of role models for the man in the street. The legislators, they are the ones who can, if they wish, ensure that the natural resources are used in a more frugal manner, more Spartan way of life, and not misuse them or not use them in a very wasteful manner. Over the years, we have also seen that the new technologies that we have adopted or developed and which are being adopted, the law is unable to meet challenges posed by those. Biological research, biological science has gone ahead in leaps and bounds, affecting even our personal or more intimate lives. And sometimes the malpractices that come out cannot be controlled by the existing laws. I'll cite a conference that was held in Hyderabad almost 20 years ago now. The theme of which was impact of new biology on justice delivery system. And the Chief Justice of India at that time inaugurated the conference, and several Chief Justices of the High Courts, leading advocates, lawyers, police officers of very high rank, of course, biotechnologists, social scientists, religious leaders, all the stakeholders came together to debate and discuss that issue. At that time, practices like in vitro fertilization, IVF, or what we call the test tube baby, surrogate motherhood, and several other developments, the DNA fingerprinting. And it was found that the laws that existed at that particular time were unable to tackle certain situations, awkward situations that arose out of these practices. For example, the prenatal sex determination test, which was actually developed to help some unfortunate individuals, unfortunate couples that are victims of some genetic diseases, to predict them in advance so that they can be helped in a proactive manner. Yet, that test was being used for selective female feticide to kill girl babies. And that had to be curbed. But that could not be done by merely banning that particular test. It would have been akin to throwing the baby with the bathwater. But it had to be controlled in a manner that it can be used to the benefit of the society at large. So unless lawmakers are also made aware of these developments and made to think in a rational manner, which unfortunately is not the practice that is followed in political thinking, or at least the kind of politics that is being followed in the country. So aim would be to involve those people also. In other words, people in all walks of life need to be made aware and made to practice rational mode of thinking, rational way of thinking, or what we call method of science, or scientific, inculcating scientific temper. So that is the fourth new paradigm that we have to imbibe. Science communicators have been using several media, of course, starting with print media. There was a time when this was the only means of communication. Then soon we had electronic media. Then we have interactive media, like lectures, like what we are having now, where there's a limited participation in the public. Again, it was more like a monologue by the lecturer with scant opportunity for the listeners to participate. But now increasingly, and particularly the last 2 years have established that we need to use not only social media, but this digital media, an online manner, like what we are having today. You're all gathered in Mumbai. I'm speaking from Singapore. And we have this interaction between us all because we have these platforms which allow us to use the online media of communication. Last couple of years have seen our entire education program be conducted in this particular manner. I'm not sure whether we have done that in a very successful manner. But we'll have to do that. We have to live with it. Maybe in a hybrid manner, part online, part offline. But online will come to stay. And it has its advantages. Because the physical distance is no longer an obstacle. No longer. Secondly, if we have someone who is a think tank person, who has several thoughts, who has several new ideas, or even a teacher, let's say, who is an excellent teacher, why should only those who attend that school benefit from his erudite way of teaching? We can make that available to a larger section of the society, no matter where they are physically, by resorting to this online mode of teaching. So more and more of use of social media, of this electronic, digital, online mode of communication will have to be used. And that is the next paradigm that I said before. Because that's the new normal that's going to come about. It has already been established in post-pandemic fashion. So in a way, this will be direct to home mode of science communication. Because now we can engage those, for example, housewives, who may be unable to get out of the house to attend lectures or workshops or webinars. There was a retire yesterday, we had a meeting of the Nehru Science Center and we thought about this. What we are thinking of there, and it has already been done to a certain extent in IIT Bombay, where a room is reserved for people to come in and carry out experiments to develop the ideas that they have, guided by experts in the field, to a certain extent supervised by that field, but otherwise they are free to carry out the experiments or establish ideas that they already have. Some of these have resulted in products that now can be disseminated in a major way. Of course, this has been restricted so far to students and maybe families of faculty that stay on campus. But we are thinking that there will be large number of retirees, and people have to retire at the age of 60, but today, with the increased life expectancy, life in a way begins at 60, if I may say so. So these are people who are still active. They might be bubbling with enthusiasm, that their new ideas, new thoughts, new views of viewpoints. But since they do not have any means or apparatus or an opportunity even to see if those ideas work, and if they do, then how can they be utilized to come about with something that would be of benefit, that would be of value to the society at large. And this can be done. This would also be a sort of role of science communication, more in a hands-on manner. And as I said, housewives or those who are unable to leave the house can also benefit if we use this online mode of communication. That's the sixth paradigm that I'm talking about. And one more, which has been touched very briefly in the comments that were made earlier. Today is the age of what we call infotainment. Even the most serious discourse that we have, or serious message that we want to give to society at large, if it's given in an entertaining manner, marry information and entertainment together to form a new mode of communication, infotainment, I think that will have to be adopted by science communicators. It would no longer behave if you have only a erudite discourse full with somewhat distant, somewhat which is unable to get to scientific parlance, instead of using it in a more entertainment manner. Well, it has already been done to a certain extent by those who indulge in science fiction. That fiction is an entertainment. Movies. There have been some science fiction movies so far, but unfortunately, those that have come from Hollywood have been more of the fairy tale manner, the Harry Potter movies, or those which are very difficult to understand, like Interstellar or Gravity. Only those who are serious students of high-level physics would probably enjoy those movies or understand the message that is being given in those movies. But we can have many others in a more simple manner. Videos. In fact, this infotainment has also taught us that a short bite, couple of minutes, can go a long way in giving the message in a more subtle manner. And the subliminal way of giving the message is much more effective, as psychologists have found out, than a large discourse. You see that in a subtle way that whatever happens or whatever appears on Twitter gets circulated or disseminated much faster than a lengthy article in a newspaper or a lengthy lecture at whatever forum that we have available. So that would be another paradigm that science communication will have to undergo. I think I have elaborated upon half a dozen or more paradigms that we need to adopt to take science communication to a new level and the new era that we are going to witness and live in a very near future. Thank you very much.